Hello and welcome to season 10 of the Meaning Movement podcast. If you're watching this, if you're hearing my voice, this is the culmination of a ton of work that my team and I have been doing over the past few months to get ready, to get prepared to 4X our production with this podcast. You may have heard me talk about before how important the Meaning Movement is to me personally and how much I've wanted to see it to go to new places, and how I'm kind of just throwing everything at the wall, see what sticks, and kind of blowing it up to see what's going to happen. And this episode and this season of the next couple of months of doing 2 episodes per week is a piece of that process for me. So I'm so excited to be here with you, to be doing this together. So welcome to season 10. If you're not on our email list, please take a moment and go to themeaningmovement.com. Just hit pause even right now and do this if you're able to. Go to themeaningmovement.com and jump on the email list. We're, in addition to the work that we're putting into the podcast, we're producing trainings, workshops, worksheets, all kinds of other material to help you find more purpose, more meaning in your life and in your work. And most of it is for free for you, but you only get it if you're on that email list. So go to themeaningmovement.com and opt into the email boxes you'll see all around the site. So let's get into it. As a friendly disruptor of the status quo, Timothy Eldred has been inspiring people to live a full life for the past 30 years. He's a husband, father, writer, speaker, seeker, coffee snob, pipe smoker, bourbon drinker, and a man of faith. He helps people and organizations release their potential by pushing limits without hesitation. He's influenced countless people throughout the world by helping them dream again, rediscover perspectives, and reach their desires. He's currently pursuing his Ph.D. in organizational management and leadership with an emphasis on aloneness and authenticity, 2 words that we explore a lot together in this interview. I had so much fun with Tim. He's in many ways a kindred spirit. I love featuring folks that are in places like where Tim is, where he's aware that something is emerging in his life and in his work, but he's not totally sure what that's going to look like yet. In some ways, that's also where I am in the Meaning Movement. As we step into this new season of episodes, I don't know where this is going to take me, but I know some of the good that I hope it will create in the world. And now you just have to follow the plan, stay the course, and see where this will take us. The many pivots that might come, who knows? All of this is to say, I think there's some great stuff in this conversation. I'm just so excited to share it with you. Let's get to it. This episode, like all episodes of the Meaning Movement podcast, is made possible by the Calling Course. I just want to say, what do I mean by that when I say made possible? It sounds like something that they say in Sesame Street at the beginning or the end. My kids love Sesame Street. What I mean by that is this is a bootstrapped project. I have a course called the Calling Course. It's what I consider the cornerstone or flagship offering of the Meaning Movement. That course is all about work, all about purpose, all about navigating this space of these questions of who am I? What is my life about? Where am I going? What's my contribution going to be? Whether that's right now, in the future, whatever it might be. This podcast has expenses. We pay for those expenses via sales of that Calling Course, also through sponsorships. Share a little bit more about in just a moment. But I wanted to just, instead of talking about the Calling Course here today, wanted to share some words from a recent member of the course. This is Ryan. He sent this over and gave me permission to share this with you. So I'm going to read from him his thoughts on being a part of the Calling Course. He says, discovering more of who I am and how that connects to the world in work is an overwhelming process. It can be hard to know where to start and easy to feel stuck. The Meaning Movement has been a great acceleration, affirmation, and help in this to me. The Calling Course specifically offered new perspectives and a deeper invitation into who I am and how I can walk the path to becoming my fullest self, connected to others in a mission through work. I love that so much. The combination of material, questions, and direct coaching through Q&A is powerful. I recommend it to anyone doing the hard work of walking deeper into their call. First, thank you so much, Ryan, for those words. They are just so fantastic. And I couldn't have said it better myself, which is why I'm reading them here. If you're listening or watching and you want to know more about the Calling Course, the course I open up for enrollment periodically. I don't have a set schedule at this time, but the best way to know when it's going to be the next enrollment period is going to be opening is for you to be on the email list. You can get on the email list anywhere at themeaningmovement.com. You'll find a bunch of subscribe boxes around the site, or go to the Calling Course, thecallingcourse.com. There is a free mini course. It gives just a small taste of what the Calling Course is all about. If you join that mini course, you'll be sure to be on the list for our next enrollment. So if any of that sounds exciting and enticing to you, make sure to jump on the email list, and then you'll be notified when that next enrollment period opens. I just want to take a quick moment to talk about sponsorship. I've always said that this podcast, this endeavor is made possible by the Calling Course. What that means is it's self-funded, it's bootstrapped, but we are opening the door to sponsors to come alongside us if they're a good fit for our audience. So if you have a business, a service, or work for someone who does, that would like to get in front of an audience like ours, shoot us an email at podcast@themeaningmovement.com. We can tell you more about what we have to offer by way of our audience and sponsorship opportunities, and we can take the conversation from there. Podcast@themeaningmovement.com. Thanks so much. Jim, thank you so much for joining me. Welcome to the Meaning Movement podcast.
Dan, our last conversation, which was our first conversation, was like, I've just made like a new friend. So to be able to not just have a conversation with you, but then join you on your podcast, is just bonus. So thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for saying that. And the feeling is 100% mutual. Super excited to be digging in with you here and just getting to know more of you and more of your story. The question I like to begin with is, how do you begin to talk about the work that you do?
Goodness, I get that question all the time, and it's not cut and dried anymore. At one point in my life, it was really crystal clear. I've been in church work, pastoral work, nonprofit work for about 30 years. When people say, so you serve a church? Well, no, I travel about 150 days a year, and I train leaders, and then I write, and then I speak, and I'm involved in 2 or 3 different nonprofits, and I have my own programs, and that's always kind of been the case. It's still the case. I was asked last week, I was at a skin cancer doctor, which is not a big deal for me. I mean, it can be a big deal, but I go every 6 months, and she's like, cut something off every 6 months. I just know it's like, the question is, how many Band-Aids am I going to have on me by the time I leave her office? So she's very aware of what I do. She's read some of my books and asked me to be involved in some of their oncology gatherings. But her assistants or nurses who are in the room are never quite, familiar with who I am. And so the one nurse, after hearing the conversation, said, so what's your favorite place to visit in the world? Knowing that I've been to dozens of countries. And I said, you might think it's interesting. Like if I'm going on vacation or holiday, that's one location. But if I'm just traveling for work, I like to go where mamas have to bury their babies, which sounds really morose, right?
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is there is so much beauty in some of the poorest places in the world where the need is so great, but people are usually so pure and undefiled by the additives or the supplements that we place in our lives. So what I'm doing today, after 30 years, I'm finally getting to your question. After 30 years, I'm making a transition. And I don't know what that looks like yet, which might be interesting for your audience who are searching for meaning, right?
Yeah.
To not exactly know. I was listening to a podcast today. I was going down to pick up my son and daughter-in-law's dog. My granddog, I guess you'd call it, which my wife doesn't like the word granddog because she's hoping someday it might be more than a dog.
Yeah.
And I was listening to a podcast, and the guy's name is Dan Carlin, and his podcast is called Hardcore History. He's got millions of followers.
Yep.
And he was just talking about when he started it years ago, he just hoped it wouldn't be a failure, but he didn't know what it was going to be.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's where I'm at right now. I stepped out and left a 30-year career to say, I want to help people live with authenticity, and I want to help remove people's aloneness. Dan, I have ideas of what that's going to look like. I just don't know how it's going to flesh out. And it's scary as hell. It's scary. I'm like, I don't know if I can pay my bills next month.
Yeah.
And that's the route we are wandering. So I know what I'm wanting to accomplish. I don't know the how exactly yet, but
Mm.
we're hanging on and we're hopeful. And we can tell that we are having an impact. Now,
Yeah.
6 months from now, I might be living with you in Seattle. I don't know. But no, it's really good. We've got a
Yeah.
good team around me.
Yeah.
I have a lot of people smarter than me working for me, and that's the
Yeah.
goal. The goal
Yeah.
is to help people live with a greater sense of authenticity, because I don't think a lot of us really understand what that maybe means.
Yeah, well, I want to dig into that, but I just want to comment on like it just feels so familiar to when I started the meaning movement, almost 10 years ago. Just wanted to help people figure out what to do with their lives and navigate,
Mhm.
the questions of purpose and calling, and especially when it comes to work and career. But then what does that actually look like to actually do it? And how do I pay the bills? I mean, I feel like it's an ongoing conversation around my house that I'm having with myself and my wife. It's like, okay, how are we doing this month? Which has led down all kinds of other rabbit holes, rabbit trails. But yeah, I guess it sounds like you're the kind of person that has a lot of irons in the fire. And that, I guess, when you listed off at the kind of the beginning of your answer to that question, that you did church work, pastoral work, nonprofit work, you mentioned some books. One of the first things is like, I'm not sure how all of that equates to paying the bills. So how have you thought about that in your life? I guess, which is another way of saying, what are all the different ways that you have paid the bills up until this point?
Well,
Because
first of
that's,
all,
yeah,
my wife has been a school teacher, a public school teacher for 34 years.
yeah,
And I always tell people, I'm thrilled to have a wife who's a public school teacher, because it means someday, because she teaches middle school, 7th grade, the entire time, which
yeah.
means someday, as a
Wow.
public school teacher, your tax dollars are going to pay for her mental health care, because she needs it. She would say that, hey, you know what? You can tackle this new venture
Mm,
because I'll bankroll it for a while, right?
yeah.
And I just admit that, like, she
Yeah.
is a consistent income. And
Yep.
there's times when I've ventured out on something new that, like, the finances dip and then they surge, and we've
Yeah.
always been fine. Again, because I
Yeah.
surround myself with really good people. Up until 2020, when most of us had to shift, that's the word of the decade. I was on the road about 150 days a year, and speaking most of that time, whether it be in a corporate gathering, leading a board through transition, speaking at large events or a school event or a stadium event, whatever it was. That was profitable. That was lucrative. I
Yeah.
loved that. I've done that my entire life. I am a communicator. And all of a sudden that had to stop. And it's not
Yeah.
just because it stopped because of COVID. That was a short hiatus. But Dan, I think I shared with you that in the midst of that 2 years, I come to some real health tragedies.
Hmm.
And I've had I'd like to say I had a health crisis. That would mean singular. It doesn't work
Yeah.
that way for me. If you're going to do it, go big or go home. And
All the
so
way.
we just went with health crises, let's
Yeah.
just double it up. And so I was actually taking 3 months off. I was going to make this change in my life in 2020. The
Yeah.
transition I'm just starting to make in the last few months was supposed to happen about 2 years ago.
Mm.
But when I took 3 months just to kind of regroup and implement a plan that we had been, architecting for a while, I come down with this very severe pain in my head, and I'd like to say it was my throat or my face, but it was just like the whole left side of my head, from my ear to my jaw to my neck to my tongue to my throat.
Mm.
And keeping the story short, it took 10 months to diagnose that. And when I say pain, well, listen, I understand pain. I'm a spine surgery patient with 5 disc
Mm.
repairs. And so I've lived in chronic pain a lot. So that pain was severe. This pain made that look like, a hangnail.
Wow.
And so ends up I have a very rare nerve disorder called Glossopharyngeal Neuralgia, which is a mouthful.
Yeah.
And only 1 in 2 million people have it if you have it on one side bilaterally. I happen to have it bilaterally. I have it on both sides. So once again, just do it right, man. 1 in 4 million people. And there's no cure for it. There's some Hail Mary ideas that we try to do it. And they can do surgery, which I'm trying to prevent a craniotomy. We finally got it under control, but it was debilitating. I mean, it will put you to the ground and sometimes last a minute, and sometimes the pain will last an hour.
Wow.
So we dealt with that for a long time, and the depression that came with chronic pain.
Mm.
So I'm sure you've got audience members who've dealt with chronic pain, others who've dealt with depression, or some who've dealt with the combination of both.
Yeah.
I've dealt with both, and I've been on medication for depression. I'm not embarrassed about that because it's a gift when you
Mm.
need it. I think it's
Mm.
overprescribed too often. I think we would all agree with that, and especially in the
Yes.
good old USA, that we are really overprescribed in a lot of areas, over medicated. But in
Yeah.
the midst of then trying to find that, we discovered what is deemed as a huge aneurysm in my brain. So you can have a small aneurysm or a medium-sized aneurysm. There's no such thing, or I'm sorry, it goes this way: small, large, and huge. For some reason, we don't deem anything medium,
No.
as we have small, large, and huge. And
Okay.
once again, I'm just going to go all the way, man. And
All the
so we
way.
went for,
All
we
in.
went for huge, and we put it in a location in my brain where even my neurosurgeon, who is renowned, said, Tim, if that were my brain, I would just tell you to live your life, because the risk of rupture, which we don't know, is unknown. But the risk of catastrophic results on a surgical table are not survivable.
Mm.
So all of that says, okay, we can't just jump into this transition.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people out there are trying to transition into new careers, new ventures. They want to take a risk, and there are setbacks, and that's fine. They can be financial, they can be mental, they can be relational, they can be medical. All of them can feel like real obstacles or boulders in our way. And so mine at this point weren't financial or organizational. I had enough profits build up that I could continue to pay staff while I figured out my medical issues, and no one had to lose their job. It was a blessing. But I learned from previous transitions to work really hard to remember that water flows around obstacles. It's fluid. You don't have to demolish the obstacle. You don't have to regroup or stop or feel like you've been halted because of an obstacle. You just have to be flexible.
Yeah.
And keep the end goal in mind, which is to not just trickle down the hill until you become a stream, until you become a river, till you reach the ocean, which is your goal, because you'll never reach it if you let every obstacle stand in your way. And if you're
Yeah.
trying to transition and making a difference and trying to figure out your meaning of your life, you are going to hit some obstacles that just naturally arise.
Mm.
And those were mine. And I
Yeah.
could have quit. Oh,
Yeah.
you know how that goes, Dan. I could have just said, screw it. I can't do this anymore. I'm just going to go back to what was I thinking? I mean, did I
Mm.
actually think I could, 50 plus years old, I could change careers in the middle of it and,
Yeah.
switch and shift? And no, did
Mm.
those thoughts cross my mind? Oh, they absolutely crossed my mind. Those were some dark days that went along with some of the depression.
Yeah.
Some of that was natural and some of that was caused by the medication, one of the side effects of it.
Yeah.
But again, I surrounded myself with a really good team that helped me keep focused on the future of what we wanted to do.
Mm. Yeah, man, what a challenging season. And yeah, I guess I'm just struck by how 3 months turned into an indefinite change in the way you think about your life and
It's
your
still a
future.
change, right?
Yeah.
Because even the blueprint that we had crafted, which included a lot of travel.
Yeah.
But when the doctor looks at your wife and says, Cindy, 50% of all aneurysms are survivable, 80% of all people who survive them go on to live normal lives, 20% have maybe some lifelong struggles they'll have to navigate. Your husband's aneurysm is not that.
Mm.
If it ruptures, he will die. But
Yeah.
the good news is he won't even know it.
Mm.
He just won't even know it. It's that
Yeah.
significant. And so, but when you hear that, you say, I'm not spending 100+ days in an airplane anymore,
Yeah.
away from my wife. So
Yeah.
now you're figuring out, how are you making a living behind a different
Yeah.
kind of microphone? Instead of on
Yes.
stage, sitting behind this
Yep.
podcast microphone,
Yeah.
instead of communicating what you've been saying for a very long time to a different audience in a different way, you're writing it.
Yeah.
You're creating more blogs and more books and more
Mm.
courses and resources, which I think in the end, Dan, is actually going to be better for not just me, but for the people I'm trying to communicate with, because it's one
Yeah.
thing to give a 45-minute, yay, rah, rah message from
Uh-huh.
as a keynote speaker and light everyone on fire. And it's another thing to really walk them through
Yeah.
a process. And a process is long. Process, there's no shortcut.
Yeah.
And this, unfortunately, there are so many, I think I used this word earlier, there are so many supplements and additives that we consume, just like food or vitamins or, there's so many things we consume that promise you like instant results. Drop 30 pounds in 30
Yeah.
days. Okay,
Yeah.
that's hogwash. I mean, if you do
Uh-huh.
that, you're not losing weight in a healthy way, right?
Uh-huh.
Eat this handful eat this dirt. You're going to get
Yeah.
everything you possibly need out of it. And so the process that I'm taking my clients and audience through is long and hard and arduous that will take them to the destination they want. I mean, if they're looking for a shortcut, you can buy those hacks, anywhere
Yeah.
and waste a lot of time and money. Or you
Mhm.
can follow a process to get to, like you say, real meaning.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a
Mhm.
challenge. Sometimes it's
Yeah.
painful, but
Yeah.
the result is always, man, I feel better. I look better. I'm doing
Mhm.
better. I'm accomplishing more.
Yep.
And sadly, though, with our internet world and everything that we do, it's just too easy to go, oh, that looks so much easier. And it's only
Yeah. The
$9.99.
grass is always greener. Yes.
Oh my
Yes.
goodness. And it seldom works.
Yes. A lot of times people come to me and they wanting to figure out their next thing and
Mhm.
have gone through a process where they had a dream and that dream died in some way, whether it was taken from them, whether they aged out of it,
Yeah.
whether, whatever happened. So they had this vision in their mind of this is what my life is going to look like in X number of years. This is the destination I'm headed towards. Maybe even they might even say, this is my calling that I'm pursuing. And then all of a sudden, that's not a viable option for them in their lives. And so, one of the things that I always recommend people do in those situations is to really think about, like, what is the role of grief? How can they let go, practice letting go of the life that they thought they were going to have in order to create space to welcome in something else. And I'm curious for you, one, how that idea lands with you, how that process has played out in your transition, and if you have any steps for people to take in that direction.
Dan, we all gravitate towards safety, especially when things get hairy, right? Security and safety. And I get it. I hired a life coach at about the same time this was all going on. I started earlier. And I've done programs of finding your strengths and your gifts and your uniqueness and your Enneagram and, what number are you? All that.
Yeah.
Not discounting any of that.
Yeah.
But I finally hired somebody that I've known for a long, long time. And he does a lot of work with the executive leaders of large corporations and global organizations. And I called him knowing dang well I couldn't afford him, right? He was outside of my budget of what he charges his clients, but he made an exception. I think it's called charity. He's probably writing that off as like a gift in kind or something to an
Pro bono
organization.
work.
Pro bono work. He asked me 3 questions that I thought I had answered. And so I'll ask him of the people listening. And you're not going to figure them out in an hour.
Yeah.
You're not going to figure them out in an hour if you think you can shortcut this one. But I thought I had my life mapped out pretty well too at that point. I
Yeah.
figured, okay, I know what the next 5-10 years looks like. I'm going to be retired by 60. I'll be just fine financially and the whole deal. Until he asked me, who are you? What do you want to do? How do you want to do it? Which I thought I had figured out until we went back to that
Yeah.
first pesky question of who are you? I was asked that question back in about 2006 as well. I ran into an individual I barely knew in an airport in Portland, Oregon. We were both had flights delayed. And so we struck up a conversation. He asked me the same question. I gave him the same answer. I started answering with my title, my education, my experience. I mean, the last thing I said was, well, I'm a husband or a father, but that's not who I am, right? Those are still roles that I play. And all those roles are important. So I had to answer that question, who is Tim? And if there was nothing standing in your way, and you knew you couldn't fail, what does Tim want to do? And if you had every opportunity, how would that exactly look? So he began asking me questions like, name the stages you've stood on. And so he knows my world. He's like, is there a stage that you haven't stood on, like the top 10 stages in your profession? Have you spoken at all of them? Yes. How many times you spoken at them? Multiple. And he said, but you want to do something different. I said, I do. I don't know what that is yet. I just know I want to do something different. And for me, Dan, that was the first step, is just knowing I want to do something different. Now, you asked an interesting question, like some things have to die.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. It's easy to say no to something that has literally died. Like you are fired. You don't have a choice in the matter. But if you're choosing to leave one profession or one expertise and dabble in another and hoping that becomes your dream that you have manipulated in your mind for a really long time, you can always gravitate towards safety.
Yeah.
Or others will try to pull you back in. It's like Finding Nemo, the movie Finding Nemo. Nemo needs to get out of the aquarium and go swim in the ocean
Yeah.
because he was an ocean fish, right?
Yeah.
Well, most people listening, you know what? You're an ocean fish too. You just maybe you've been stuck in an aquarium for a while. And not the aquarium sucks. It just might be a little confining for you at this stage of your life. And you're feeling restless. So you're going to try to leave the aquarium and then you're going to realize that it's really hard out here. I'll go back to
Yeah.
the aquarium. Or you're going to leave the aquarium and your phone's going to ring and your email inbox is going to fill up and people going, Dan, come on back. Dan, come on back.
Yeah.
We can't live without you. And then they're going to inflate your ego. So you'll get this self-inflated idea of I'm really important. And you'll
Yeah.
find yourself in a place where you feel really miserable because that's what you decided what you didn't want to do. And not because it was bad. It's just, it's okay to make a change.
Yeah.
And, depending on your age, like my sons are 24 and 27. They will have multiple careers, They'll live in multiple places. They're a little nomadic anyway because they follow their dad's example. But they're perfectly fine with that. Some of us who are 40, 50, 60 or older, you get 30 years into a career and then you're going to change. That is labeled
Yeah.
as you're a loser.
Yes.
You're a failure.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I've wrestled through all of those emotions. Like I said earlier, I wrestled through, what are you thinking? Maybe it's just easier to go back to what you were doing. And when you have to let something die and say goodbye to something, I would tell your audience that I'm still 2 years into that. And I
Yeah.
don't think I'm a slow learner.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the real process of grief.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
think it is the 5 stages of grief when you walk away
Yes.
from one career, one venture into another. You've got to
Yep.
go through all of it. And if you
Mm.
skip one, it's always like, you go back to go. Do not, go to jail.
Yep.
Go directly to jail. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Then you got to break out of that again instead of just going through the steps one at a time.
Yeah. I love that. It's so good. It reminds me the way you talk about like that you're 2 years in, you're still going through it. It reminds you of William Bridges' Transitions, a book by William Bridges, where he talks about transitions as like conceptually we think about them as a moment. We're at this job and then we end this job and then, then we find the new job and then we start that job. But internally it's a much longer process that starts much long before, that one job ends or that next job begins and then continues on longer, than those moments, and you replace job with whatever transition that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
That our internal space moves at a much slower pace than the externalities that, are happening in our lives. And I hear you inviting people to think a longer term scale that, it is a process and you have to be willing to accept that process.
Well, and I think it's even harder because transitions are slow in a world that just continues to spin out of control and is only going faster. And we're wondering
Yes.
why our lives don't match the pace of change going on around us.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the pace of change around us that is completely unnatural. And what we're going through is a complete normal process,
Yeah.
but we're not used to taking our time.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That is really good. Like
I just made that up. So there you go.
Yes. Well, I think it just reminds me of some conversations I've had recently around autism with a friend who's a therapist who she was saying like, everyone, like we talk about the different way personalities interact with, society as if there is a norm and then there's the deviations from the norm. But it's like capitalism or capitalistic society is saying this is how a person, a human should be. But what if it's just completely organic and normal that there's all kinds of different humans. There's all kinds of different personalities. There are all kinds of, we have the spectrum, in the world of autism. That's her expertise. But it's just reminiscent of that in some ways. Like, what if the transition that we're imagining in our head of how life should be and how our transition should go isn't like the organic or natural process, but it's something that's being fed to us by society, by capitalism, by consumerism, by whatever else, by social media, and that something else much slower, much more authentic is like actually the correct, or I don't even, correct doesn't feel like the right word, but the more natural path.
Yeah. I'm not sure that linear is organic.
Yes. Completely.
We have a timeline in our head. And if it doesn't go according to that timeline, because we mapped it out, April 27th, this is what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to be here by July 1st. And then by October 1st, I'm going to be here, not recognizing that this is a dance.
Yes.
And it's a waltz. And the timing feels awkward in this 3/4 time. And we're dancing in a circle, trying to move in a circle. So I was a dancer when I was a kid. I was in music theater. I went to college for musical theater and did some professional work for a while. But I remember the first time that I was actually 16 years old, and I was learning to waltz with a dance partner who was about 50 years old and weighed about 80 pounds, which was good because I had to pick her up and spin her. And I knew that we had to make it to the other side of the stage. I just didn't know you meant in a straight line by spinning in a circle as you went, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's how you got to the next point. You
Mm,
just didn't
mm.
walk straight. You had to spin as a couple while
Yep.
manipulating each other into a circle to get from point A to point B. And I wonder if that's what transition looks like. You're
Mm,
spinning in a circle, which sometimes feels out of control, but you're
yep.
eventually going to get there, but you don't do it one foot in front
Mm.
of the other as we normally walk or move.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. That is really, really helpful. And I hope that listeners will take that to heart. That's a messy process, and that is completely okay and
Yeah, I
even
dropped her 2 or 3
necessary.
times, so it's a really
Yeah.
messy process.
Yes, yes.
I
Well,
guarantee
related
it.
to
I mean, I know I did. I know I dropped her 2 or 3 times, and I ended up with bursitis in my shoulder. So I'm like, "Oh my gosh," there was nothing fun about all of that. I think all that plays into our conversation.
Yeah. Well, I think related to that, I wanted to just hear your thoughts on, especially someone who's transitioning later in life. There's a lot of people who are listening who might be in a similar place where, like, okay, I'm over 50 and I've been doing this one thing for a really long time. To think about leaving means leaving, a career that has, years and years of experience that looks really good on my resume. It means leaving maybe a grad school degree that I invested a lot of time and money into. It means leaving all of these things. And how do you think about sunk costs when it comes to making these kinds of transitions?
I'm not sure that I would call anything a sunk cost, but an investment. I was in Italy 3, 4 weeks ago with my best friend. We were both speaking at an event. So we were sitting out on a veranda in the evening overlooking Rome and sitting under the moon, smoking a cigar and enjoying the scenery. And he asked me, do you think I can do something different? So he's 54 years old. He leads a very large organization. He's COO of a very large organization, but he's always been in the same field. And I said, you are responsible for a multi-million dollar budget with hundreds of staff in multiple locations. Those skills cannot be taken away from you. That experience is transferable.
Yeah.
So when you walk away from a career path, if you want to call it that you've been in for a very long time, you've got a lot to celebrate and you can pick up those skills, and those skills are transferable.
Yeah.
Even more than that, those skills that you learned should be a reminder that I'm teachable.
Yeah.
I'm trainable. I didn't have all these skills 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. I gained them and gathered them along the way. More than that if you've been in a career for that long and you are successful in any measure of the word, depending on what you want to measure success by, then you've had a heart that has helped you with your passion accomplish things along the way and learn those skills that most people have let go, jettisoned, or failed at.
Mm.
Dan, one of the things I tell people all the time when I'm looking at hiring somebody new, I don't always look at their skill set. I look at their heart. There's nothing that you need to know that you can't learn. I
Yeah.
can teach skills. I can get you trained. I can send you to a school. I can send you to a conference. All that's easy. What I can't do is put a work ethic and a heart in you. If
Yeah.
you've got a work ethic and a heart for what you want to do, that will spell out your future success. Anything
Mm.
else you need to know, you either know it or you can gain it. But your
Yeah.
passion is not something you chase. It's
Mm.
something you carry in your pocket.
Mm.
People are
Mm.
always like, it's my calling, it's my passion. No, you don't find your passion. You don't chase your passion. You bring it with you. And if you bring your passion along, you'll be just fine. Just be patient with yourself.
Yeah. I love that. And I love that it just feels like such a generous invitation toward reimagining how we think about our experience. Yeah, maybe not as hard skills, maybe our hard skills. I guess what I'm saying is like they're markers of maybe recognition of who we are and that we're
Mhm.
carrying that with us no matter what the expression takes and no matter where we put that energy and that effort in the world, which I think is a really fun and
I
great way
mean,
to.
as you make this transition, there may be some things you have to let go of. I mean,
Mhm.
for me, at this moment in our life, we really like our standard of living,
Yeah.
but right now we're having to watch things differently. We're have to,
Yeah.
count the cost of everything we do because we don't believe in debt. We don't go in debt. We don't use credit. And so right now we're having to say what we are investing the resources that we have, or we're investing into a new opportunity.
Mm.
And so that opportunity is more valuable to me and to our household and our entire family right now, then some of the experiences we may have to temporarily put on hold.
Yep.
So there's always a cost to the
Yep.
transition, but
Yep.
the fulfillment of accomplishing something new is much greater than some of the activities, events, trips, whatever stuff you can fill your life with instead of it. And I think that's what we do.
Yeah.
Going back to that word again,
Yeah.
supplement. Instead of pursuing that passion or that dream or that idea that you want to do at 50 years old, we refrain, we hold ourselves back because of the fear of failure. And then what do? Then we fill our life with all kinds of stuff, which is just, that's what I mean by artificial. Filling your
Yep.
life with stuff that is not as fulfilling as you really want it to be because you're afraid of failing.
Yeah. That is so good. So good. I want to just circle back to some of your focus in your current work. You use two words that I think are really interesting words, particularly paired together, which is authenticity and aloneness. I don't typically think of those two words as relating to each other, but clearly you do. I'd love to hear you talk about the relationship between those two ideas.
Well, it begins with the idea of aloneness. Now, not everyone uses the word aloneness to describe the feeling that I'm indicating. They use the word lonely, alone. Those are issues of proximity or emotional issues. In my research and my Ph.D. work on aloneness, I've come to discover that it is a state of being, and it's two sides of the same coin. And people would make this argument that you can have a sense of aloneness that is really healthy. It includes a confidence in who you are and a solitude and a peace where when you're alone, you're not miserable. And then there's another side of the same coin that you're not comfortable in your own skin. You don't feel like you belong. You don't sense a sense of significance. And so your aloneness there also turns into a state of being. Both are states of being. The question is, what side of the coin are you on? And so I wrote a book on the issue called Alone Sucks. That'll grab your attention as you walk down the airport, and see it on the turnstile. Alone sucks. And in the midst of that, because it's always been sadly, that's been a passion of mine, a passion project from years ago. And I explain in the book how the title came and where the story come from. But I was trying to figure out what is the root? What's the root cause? Because I happen to believe that alone is the cause of a lot of the symptoms that we suffer from in life. But if aloneness is the cause of many of those symptoms, what's the cause of aloneness? And for me, that's a sense of, like I said a moment ago, it's not a sense of being, belonging. It's fitting in. It's faking it. It's wearing a mask. All of those issues are artificial. So the question becomes, why do we live an artificial life? What is it we're afraid of? What are we trying to hide? What do we fear? And if we fear it, what is it we don't trust? Is we don't trust people. We don't trust ourselves. We don't trust the circumstances of the situation that we're in. Are we afraid of being hurt? Because the root cause of a lack of trust is fear. So what do we fear? And what do we compensate our lives to eliminate that sense? And so we fill our lives, like I said a moment ago, we fill our lives with other things. We make ourselves really, really, really busy. My wife and I had a conversation this morning. Because of some of my health issues, I still struggle to get my exercise time in, which is very important to all of us. We should all move. But I always find an excuse. My podcast with Dan went long today. I've got a meeting tonight. This happened today or that happened today. And she said, you just have to stop making excuses and start making it a priority because that's what you really want. And so as long as you've got an excuse, she said, using your own words, it's an artificial reasoning to not be authentic to what you really want to accomplish. We all fill our lives with some kind of additive that supplements where we feel like we're suffering, because that's what supplements do. And my youngest son is really on me all the time about my health. And so we were talking about this issue the other day about supplements. And he said, no one needs supplements. Nobody. If you want healthy nutrients, eat healthy stuff. Meat and fruit. Everything you need is in meat and fruit. He's on this big kick of why you don't eat vegetables. He's got great scientific evidence behind it, but I'm still studying it. But he said, Dad, everything you possibly need, everyone needs is in meat and fruit. He said, so you don't need to supplement your life with, vitamins and minerals if you just eat the right stuff. Okay, isn't the same thing true about relationships? Isn't the same thing true about our career? Isn't the same true about our time? And so there's some things we need to give up, like news. You could give up the news. That's just keeping you in a state of fear. You could give up forms of entertainment. You could give up addictions that you have inadvertently built, but it's hard. So that's the question for everybody. What are you filling your life with that is keeping you from the best? And how many of those things really are a mask from preventing anyone seeing the real you. And why are you afraid of people seeing the real you? Rejection? And those are all hard questions, which is why, again, like, the meaning movement, my projects, they're that long process of letting go of some things to discover.
Yeah.
And Dan, you don't discover treasure without digging deep.
Yeah.
Real treasure is not typically ever found on the surface.
No, not
It
at all.
requires a lot of effort and painful effort to dig deeper to the real gold.
I love it. It's such an important invitation to show up, to let yourself, and not just let yourself, but find those ways to be the real you.
Maybe it's letting yourself. I'm not disagreeing with you, but there is a level of permission required.
That's true. Yeah.
And no one else is going to give you permission to be yourself if you don't give yourself permission first.
Yeah.
You're fine just the way you are. You're a beautiful human being just the way you are. And if you don't have your own acceptance, you don't need anybody else's, because it won't fix anything.
Yes. I love it. So good. We're coming up on our time here. And so just to move towards wrapping up, I feel like these are the kinds of topics I feel like I could just, plumb the depths of with you for hours and hours. But for listeners who are, enjoying your content and want to find out more about what you're up to and learn more from you, there's specific things that you'd like to invite people to?
The easiest place to find out what I'm working on currently or what might be coming is just my webpage, TimothyEldred.com. And just like it sounds, don't spell it Eldridge. People get that wrong. I'm sure it's in your show notes, but TimothyEldred.com. Yep. There's a blog you can sign up for. It's free, but you won't miss anything. Sign up for it. My podcast, Square Peg Round Hole, How to Live with Authenticity in an Artificial World. You can find all the episodes there and how to link to it on your favorite podcast. And like anybody today, if you want to just go to @TimothyEldred under any social media channel. I'm not the most active poster, but I post things that I think have value. But TimothyEldred.com is the easiest place, Dan.
I love it. Well, Tim, thank you so much for this. It's been so fun to connect, and I personally really look forward to staying connected and continuing the friendship. So thanks for coming on the show.
Absolutely. There will be a next time. Thanks,
Yes,
Tim.
I can't wait. Thank you so much, Tim, and thank you, listeners, for tuning in. If you'd like to see our show notes, find links to Tim's work and anything else that we talked about in this episode, go to themeaningmovement.com/Tim, TIM. While you're there, as I've already said, jump on the email list. We're producing tons of great content that's for free for you. This podcast is just one piece of the bigger picture of what the meaning movement is and what we're trying to do to help you level up your life, your career, your income, helping you do work that matters. And it's all available for you via the website, themeaningmovement.com. Opt in to the email list so we can let you know we have more good stuff for you. Hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening or watching. Love for you to get future episodes as soon as they drop. If you can leave a rating or review wherever that is, or a comment, please do that. The more you engage with us, that's how we know that what I'm making, what I'm putting out there in the world is landing, that it's helpful, and it's how other people like yourself find the show. And I would be just so incredibly grateful. Our music is by Tom Roram. Our artwork is by Eliezer Ruiz. We'll be back with you shortly.